Hello everyone, welcome back to Call of Duty DFS Slate Breakdown for July the 9th. We have a 4-gamer here with a couple interesting games that we would like to talk about. I still am a little sick. I don't know whether it's allergies or cold or what, but my throat's going on me a little bit here and my nose is clogged and stuff, so it's just a little unpleasant to record and all that. So pardon me, this video will be a little bit shorter and a little bit briefer than we typically like to do, but hopefully you guys can understand that way. Quick recap on the games yesterday, because we do have obviously these teams playing again today, so it's important to note what's going on. So Seattle ended up losing to Minnesota, but this was a series, of course, I thought was going to be pretty close. I thought Minnesota would pull it out, and that's exactly what happened. However, for DraftKings purposes at least, we know that Sib and Pred went absolutely crazy here. They did end up picking the Bocage, and Sib did not start off great, but he had an insane control, a great hard point to cap it off as well. And then Pred was consistently great throughout the series as well. So nice to see, though, Sib get a little bit back into form. We obviously know Pred's been playing at an insane level. Accuracy kind of underperformed, and of course we know Mac is not the best online player in his own right. So the series actually went about according to plan, although for DFS purposes it did not go our way. We were looking at Havoc, Priest, and Attach. Havoc would have been fine because I think he was pretty cheap, but Attach and Priest specifically were just not there, and obviously Sib and Pred were much better. Obviously, I did mention in the video yesterday that looking to pair up Sib and Pred at a relatively low ownership would have been a great idea. I'm actually going to go ahead and do that now. I'm going to look and see how owned they actually were. Sorry, I'm doing it on my phone actually because it's a lot easier for some reason, because they make it so because there's like the players tab or whatever on mobile, so I'll look at it that way. If we go to players, sort by ownership high to low, it was high to low, it was actually Awakening, Celium, Simp, then Pred at 40%. Florida Mutineers team slot, it was actually a really good one, actually at 70. Havoc, then Attach, Major Maniac, Skies, FaZe team, then Sib at 21%. So Seattle was actually decently owned. I'm a little surprised by that, honestly. If we were to look by fantasy points, obviously Sib and Pred both had 150. Jimbo actually came through with 134. Simp and then Celium, Havoc, and then Afro ended up doing pretty well. He was sub 5%. Gizmo had 110 points at sub 10%. So we definitely left ourselves some paths. Obviously, things didn't end up going our way. When we look at some of the plays I liked, like Nasty and Zero, they just, although the team did well and we were on the right path for that, the overall they did not play too well. So overall, read on the league going pretty well, I think, still, although things didn't go our way here, like with these players. We did talk and mention the possibilities with going with like Sib and Pred, for example. Then on the other first game, I don't know why these are in this order, but this one we were pretty spot on as well. So there's nothing to talk about really. Although obviously we didn't get the players correct. I was looking at Zero and Nasty as my London pieces. They ended up performing pretty poorly. Afro and Gizmo are the ones that came through in the respawns phase, although they didn't do the best when it comes to winning. Specifically, I mean, the scores are very close, and Simp and Celium performed really well, especially in the first and the third map. Simp and Celium did really well, so they ended up getting there in DraftKings purposes, despite a loss as well. So pretty interesting one, although, again, we were on the right side of it. We had the right team win. We had the right idea. The execution just wasn't perfect. So, put ourselves in a good spot there, and nothing we could do. This one is kind of where things unraveled a little bit. Florida barely came back and beat Paris. They lost the first map, barely won the second map. They got full bullied on the third map. The fourth map, they barely squeaked it out. Same with the fifth as well. So pretty undeserved, uninspiring win from Florida. over Paris, who again was a team I was pretty not high on. Obviously, not many people were, and this is all while having your best player having a really bad performance in temp. Um, so, although it obviously is a very too late for Paris, they're maybe not that bad, but I think this was more so a knock on Florida and how atrocious they looked, specifically Skies. And Awakening. I mean, we don't expect much from Two Real, but Skies and Awakening specifically were just pretty absent, especially Skies in this one. Um, so yeah, overall reads on the league not too shabby at the moment. So we'll try to continue that and looking forward. Um, Sorry, I'm just trying to think a little bit of how I want to do this because I want to keep it a little brief. Um, First up, Minnesota Paris. Again, Paris. I mean, although they did bring him back and look close yesterday, it seemed like it seemed like Florida was just off of a really slow start, and uh, it just wasn't ideal from them. From Florida. I mean, but Paris is actually looking decent in control. They took the control off of Texas, and they obviously destroyed Florida on it as well. They've had two pretty strong control wins here. Um, that does limit it because that is one of the three maps that they play in terms of respawns. So it is pretty tough. That could be a possibility. However, again, in this circumstance, that just seems way too much of a reach. I'm just going to go with Minnesota, probably 3-0, maybe 3-1. Paris haven't been looking as lifeless lately. However, I still think Minnesota's a pretty solid team. We know Paris is now on the 11 series loss streak, I think now. Yep. So it's just really tough for Paris. Again, I think all the things we talked about yesterday in terms of them being pretty lifeless, having already given up on the season, all that kind of stuff, still rings true here. And although they had a surprise decent performance against Florida yesterday, I think Minnesota is just a little bit too much of a step up, and this is going to be a pretty easy win for Minnesota in my opinion. And Minnesota minus 750. Obviously, the odds agree with us as well. Nothing too much of a hot take there. When it comes to maps, we actually have a pretty strong bocage possibility here. Neither of these teams typically ban it. And we know Minnesota arguably should have or maybe could have banned it yesterday against Seattle. They tested themselves on it and ended up coming out and beating Seattle, who's a very strong bocage team on their own. So I expect these teams to go ahead and try to look to that map. Minnesota typically either ban Gavutu or Tuscan, and Paris like to either ban the Berlin or the Gavutu themselves. So the map set is looking pretty juicy. This is obviously the first series of the day, so make sure you guys are checking in 15 minutes before lock to go ahead and look at the map set update. Typically for the first series, the maps will be released about 15 minutes beforehand. So make sure you check in Twitter. I believe that at CDL Scrimtel usually gives out that info. So that's usually where I just check and try to get that. So obviously we talk about it all the time, but the best possible map set would be Bocage and Tuscan Hardpoint. I do think there is a possibility of that. However, I have a feeling that Minnesota might end up going to ban the Tuscan. Paris, that's their only hardpoint win so far, is on Tuscan. Minnesota 0-2 on it. That's why I believe it could be a possibility. However, I think they typically like to go ahead and ban the Gavutu a lot themselves. Neither of these teams like the Gavutu, so I think the odds that gets banned out is pretty high, and I think that's a very strong basis. And obviously, I think if we look at the certainties or what I view as like a pretty high chance of happening is both of these teams hate Gavutu. It's going to get banned by one of them, and I think they both are fine on Bocage, so I think it's going to get picked by one of them. So we're looking at eliminating the worst map in Gavutu, picking the best map in Bocage, and then we're either going to have the Tuscan or the Berlin, which I think is fine either way. Obviously, I would prefer a Tuscan, but the Berlin is fine as well. So you're offering me the first and second or the first and third best possible maps. So I'm fine either way. I'm lock and loading tons of Minnesota. Players, they're all really expensive. It's very tough to try to justify much. However, hopefully we can find some underdogs, find some value, and try to squeeze this in here. Standy's just ridiculously overpriced at 11,200. That's the most expensive player I've ever seen, honestly. And he's probably their worst one, so that's definitely a easy spot to avoid. Attach at 10.8. That's also again very very expensive. I don't know. I believe they changed something in their pricing algorithm now because it's pretty wide open. The base floor used to be 6K and they lowered it down to 5K. So some of the lower end players are all the way down to 5,000 now, and it looks like they raised the ceiling up from 11 to probably 12, I'd imagine. So we're seeing some of these high price players get sent up a ton. So that's something to keep a note of as well. It's going to be tough, but maybe that we're going to be able to find some value, mix it in with these Paris guys, obviously, with the Minnesota guys, and go from there. I think this is a pretty good spot for Minnesota and something I'm trying to get a ton of. Up next, we have, my voice is actually going. Toronto versus Boston. I'm really unsure what to make of this one. My initial lean is just towards the Boston side for DFS purposes, especially because although the money line's like pretty close, I think the money line's a little misleading here. And if we look specifically at the respawn game modes, Toronto's 1-4 in hardpoint, 2-1 in control. Boston is 5-2 in hardpoint, 3-1 in control. Boston have not looked the best. I mean, they've had a relatively weak schedule. I'm not sure what to make of it. They beat LAG 3-1, not too crazy impressive. Seattle 3-1, again, not too crazy impressive, but still decent. They got swept by the Thieves, so that's like kind of all across the board there. And then Optic Texas, obviously, they got the win over 3-2. But again, that was a substitute with ProLoot in there for Texas, so not the craziest thing. On the flip side, Toronto, they barely squeaked by a win versus LAG, and then they lost to London and Atlanta. Probably two of the top three teams, I think, at the moment. Obviously, Atlanta FaZe are a perennial contender, and again, they've not been looking the best themselves. But they lost to London, who I think is, again, also an equal, probably top three team. So overall, it's tough. It really is tough. I mean, this one's priced very fairly, I think. Statistically, it's tough to go and try to avoid Boston. I mean, they're pretty expensive. I mean, Nero's like 10K. He would be somebody I'd like to get to. But, I mean, if we look at like Cammy, I mean, Inside is pretty underpriced at 7.8. That's definitely an option you could look at. The thing here that's interesting with the map set is I'm really unsure where these teams will go with the maps. They both have relatively spread out bans. Toronto typically either ban the Gavutu, maybe the Bocage. I would expect Toronto to go ahead and ban Bocage. Then I'm not sure what exactly Boston would return with the ban of. Either the Gavutu or the Tuscan. I mean, both of these teams are 0-2 on Gavutu, so I don't know if either of them would love to get there. However, if we look at the Tuscan, I mean, Boston have yet to play it. Toronto is 1-1 on it. So it's just kind of all over the board, like all over the place. That means we probably get the Berlin, which is pretty decent for Boston. I don't know. It's just tough to try to predict, but I do think overall Toronto should and probably will be banning out the Bocage. I think Boston's been looking pretty good on it. That's one of the two maps typically Toronto like to get rid of. So that's probably where I would have that as a Bocage ban from Toronto, and then I'm not sure what Boston would return with, but I do think that does toss its banner in the works. And I think this is overall a series I want to get very little exposure to because, again, I do think Bocage most likely banned from Toronto. And, I mean, maybe these teams want to go to Gavutu. I'm not sure. It's just the map set screams pretty bad. The teams are pretty close. The pricing isn't great. So I think overall, we'll look at the players in a little bit. but things have not been going great. Like, I guess if we expand it out a little bit and we look at the set of major three qualifiers as well, things are obviously looking a little bit better for Toronto. Um, I do like. Honestly, I'm gonna go ahead and retract my statement. I'm actually gonna go with Toronto. I think if we look at kind of those major four stats, we keep in mind they lost to FaZe and London, or Atlanta and London. I do think that's pretty strong from. Yeah, that's fine. And if we do look back even to major three quals, they were still pretty good in their own right. So I think this is a close series again. Probably one I'd like to stay away from. Nothing really stands out to me. The only piece that I'm looking to get in would probably just be Insight. I think he's pretty underpriced at 7-8. But that would probably be it. I mean, we know Scrappy's not playing, obviously, and then Cammy and Insight have been their two best players by a good bit, and Cammy's 9-8. So Insight would be there, and that's probably all I'd like to see, honestly. Like, we know for Boston, Nero and Vivid have been pretty good. Vivid at 7K, that's fine. However, again, I think he's a pretty Bocage dependent player, and I would think Toronto would and should probably ban the Bocage. But then again, like I think that's most likely what's going to happen. But I think Bocage is possible. That would definitely change things up. I think if Bocage was in this map set, Boston would be favored. But I don't think Toronto is silly enough to go ahead and test that theory. I just think Toronto go ahead and ban the Bocage out. Maybe Boston go ahead and return with the Gavutu, which is usually like one of their two bans as well. And then we go to a Berlin and Tuscan, where I think the teams are pretty evenly matched. The numbers aren't great either way. And that'll be it. Like, you can maybe try to take a shot with Vivid and hope Boston get the Bocage. However, I think it's probably just going to be Insight or pass from this series. I don't love the outlook of it all. And I think Insight at 7-8 is just simply too cheap. Next one up is the LA Thieves Florida Mutineers. So the LA Thieves are minus 240, as we could tell. This one is interesting. I'm really unsure what to make of this. The LA Thieves have been a team I've not been able to get much right on as of late. They swept Paris, they swept Boston, and they played FaZe to 5. And obviously, we know FaZe is not quite what we're looking at. They're not the craziest anymore. Like the FaZe is, they're obviously not over with, but on the other hand, FaZe just hasn't quite looked like FaZe. So I just don't know what to make of where LA Thieves are in the kind of in everything. I think the big difference has been their respawns, obviously. I think, obviously, specifically players like Octane and Draza have been pretty strong. I think they've been looking a lot better in those respawn game modes specifically. Obviously, look at their match history. They're 3-1 in Hardpoint, 3-0 in Control. They lost to FaZe by losing 2 Search and Destroys and a Hardpoint, which I think is, again, pretty fine. And just what I saw from Florida yesterday was pretty uninspiring. They had such a free series win, it felt like, over Paris. Maybe you could argue that the pressure on them got to them, but that pressure is still there. They still need to win these games to try to advance their major championship points. So the upside and stuff is there. Obviously, the last time they played was in this tiebreaker, and Florida won 3-0. But I think Florida's been worse since then. They have not been inspiring so far yet. Their random 3 over Minnesota isn't enough to convince me. And then, I just think LA Thieves have been playing at a pretty decent level lately. And I think it's just going to be a couple of these players. I'm going to look at I'm going to look at Octane and Draza. And that's going to be it for me. I think LA Thieves have been pretty dependent and pretty focused on these two players specifically. If we look at their hard points, they're at 111 and 113. In Control, 123 and 120. So that's pretty crazy from Draza and Octane. I feel like if they win, it's going to be heavily through them. I would expect them to still be pretty popular, so it's not a hot take at all here. But I just think this makes a lot of sense to me. I'm not going to be taking the underdog shot with Florida. Overall, they have not looked great outside of this Minnesota 3-0, and I don't want to put too much stock into just one series like that. The series yesterday against Paris was just Really, really bad. I mean, we do know LA Thieves have the propensity to drop a series randomly here or there, all that kind of stuff. So, um, yeah, there's some concern here, but I'm just gonna go with LA Thieves. Not gonna overthink it. You know, map watch LA Thieves permaban bocage. So we know that things are not gonna be great, and that's again probably why I'm leaning to go a little bit lighter in this series overall because again bocage, that's something that Florida love, LA Thieves hate, so they're going to ban it every day of the week. In terms of what Florida will counter ban with, I'm not sure. It would make sense for them to go ahead and ban the Gavutu, although that's just something that they've not been banning a lot of as at all. Um, Granted, they are 3-0 on it if we do look back to the Major 3 qualifiers, um, including that match over the LA Thieves. I wonder what the map set there was. I would imagine stage 3. LA Thieves. I'm sorry, I just went over it. Florida LA right here. Um, so it was the Bocage hardpoint. What? Yeah, I do. This definitely does not feel normal to me. I definitely do not think they will do that again. Um, this felt like a throw. The thing to remember with the context of this series is you wanted to lose the series. The loser of this series avoided Optic, and I think LA Thieves definitely kind of threw this one. So um, I would not look into this. I'm going to be honest. So I think in a series that they're trying to win, I assume so and hope so. LA Thieves are going to go ahead and ban the Bocage. Um, in terms of what Florida will respond with, I'm not sure. Either the Tuscan, um, maybe the Berlin. That's typically what they've looked to ban is either, or that's what Florida typically bans is either the Berlin or the Tuscan. So overall, map set very bad here, and that's again I just am keeping my exposure is pretty light here. If you wanted some super savings, I don't think a Major Maniac has been that bad lately, and he's super super cheap. So if you wanted to, like for example, like we were talking about earlier with the Minnesota stack, how expensive they all are. I think that's one way you could get them in is if you want to go down to somebody like Major Maniac at 5'6", who is the fourth cheapest player on the slate, and I think you guys would definitely look and see that his numbers are not fourth worst in the out of the 8 teams that are playing here today. So that's a spot you could go. However, I'm just gonna keep it simple. Go with Octane and Draza. Don't love loading up on the series again. Map set is not the best. And the last one up here is Atlanta FaZe versus Seattle Surge. Pretty interesting one. Two teams that are kind of on the downtrot a little. As of late, things have not looked the best for FaZe. If obviously we look here for Seattle, they're on a 3-game losing streak of their own. After winning the title, so Seattle's been a team that we've been kind of going against here as of late, and it's definitely come through. For us, that New York against Seattle one specifically was pretty strong. This is a tough one. This is a close one. I think overall, it's very hard to gauge these teams. They seem very up and down. I think this is probably one where, again, we look at the value and probably just try to jam that in. I think I could definitely see this one going either way. So if we look at the picks and bans, of what to expect, I think we overall have a very, very good map set here. I think this sets up to be potentially the best possible map set you can get. I want to go look and see what they last time the maps were that they played. Obviously not in the like best of 9 or whatever where they played in the finals, but right here they played on LAN in a playoff format. It was the Bocage Tuscan, so it is the best possible map set here, from the boys. Obviously, FaZe like to ban the Berlin, Seattle like to ban the Gavutu, so that leaves us with the Bocage Tuscan. which are just the two best hardpoint maps you can ask for. I think this sets up to be a fantastic series, a fantastic DraftKings series again, because those maps are incredibly strong. In terms of which side I'm going on, I'm probably saying both, to be honest. If we look at the players, obviously Pred is at 8.4. He's underpriced. He's going to be heavily owned. Celium is 8K. He's underpriced. He's going to be heavily owned. Accuracy, he's pretty cheap as well. They're definitely mixing things up with their pricing algorithm, which makes things interesting. We'll look at the players in a little bit. But when it comes down to like the Bocage and the Tuscan, I'm really not sure where to lean. FaZe have not been looking that great lately, but neither have Seattle. Like I just don't know where either of these teams are. It feels pretty wild to try to take a guess here. Seattle's been relying very heavily on the individual skill from their players, and I just think that kind of causes problems. FaZe have similarly been kind of down on themselves as well. Specifically, Arcities and Abizi. They've not been playing well lately. It's just kind of what stars do you think shine through? And I think this is definitely a situation where both of them are. I think Celium, Simp, Pred, and Sib are all viable. Specifically, Pred and Celium. Their numbers are just absolutely insane. They're very cheap. I could definitely think you could justify using both of them in this series. Map set fantastic. You could arguably even kind of stack the series up a little bit. Get a little crazy with it. You could go Celium, Simp, and Pred. You could go Pred, Celium, and Sib. There's a lot of ways you could go. I think you could argue even using all four wouldn't be that bad of an idea, just because I think Toronto, Boston, Bocage possible, but probably unlikely. Florida, LA, Bocage very unlikely. So we could definitely see good scores coming out of both sides here when it comes down to it. And in terms of picking a side, I'm really unsure. I really do not know. They've both been pretty bad, at different things. They're both 2-5 in the hard points. Seattle's 3-1 in the control. Atlanta's 2-2 in the control. So like pretty close there. The big difference here, obviously, is FaZe win their search and destroys. Seattle does not. I mean, I don't like to look at that either way, but for trying to get a pick right for the money line or whatever, I'm really unsure. This is tough. I think first off would recommend looking at both sides, looking at Pred and Celium, looking at Simp and Sib. I think that's definitely where my first glance would be, for sure. After that, I'm really unsure. I'm really not. Like we look at Seattle, they lost to Minnesota, New York, Boston. Not the worst teams, but I mean FaZe is pretty good, obviously on their own right. They're the kind of mark off here for FaZe is they lost to LAG, who's a team I definitely don't respect. So that's the problem. Like there's definitely something wrong with FaZe. I think there's definitely something wrong with Seattle, but one of these teams obviously have to win. So I'm unsure. I'll just go with both sides. Honestly, I'll pick Celium, Simp, Pred, and Sib, mix them all. I think the upside is there for all of them. In terms of what side, honestly, my lean is to go with Seattle here. They're obviously not that big of an underdog. However, I think the fact that we had Sib kind of come back and step up pretty big yesterday sets them up pretty well. I do think, obviously, I don't know. It's tough. I think you just got to go both sides. But I like going. I'll probably lean the Seattle side just a tad bit more because Sib stepped up yesterday, and they really need him to do so for them to, kind of have a chance. But overall, oops, I didn't mean to close all of that. We'll go ahead and look at the players before getting out of here. My voice is starting to get really, really gone. Probably spent way too long talking in this video, but you know how I get. I can just start rambling forever. On this stuff. So we'll look at just the major four qualifiers. It's been, we're in the final couple days here, so we have enough data to try to base off of current form. So major four qualifiers, we'll look at Minnesota first. I expect this is going to be, Attach and Havoc. Priest a little bit behind. Obviously had like all three of those guys. Standy's just way overpriced. It's very hard to try to justify. I think my order would be probably Havoc, Attach, Priesta. However, again, I think they're all three fine. Um, um, Toronto, Boston. Again, I'm not sure. This is probably just an insider pass. Um, his numbers have been pretty decent. He's 7,800. I would like to try to get up to Nero maybe, but you're asking a lot there, especially at his price tag of 10K. So that's probably a spot I'd like to avoid. I think you could argue TJ Halley has decent enough numbers at 6,400 to justify. But again, I think if we were to look overall and expand this out a little bit further, we would see just how well Toronto is playing before they ran into, I think, pretty solid teams, obviously in FaZe in London. So we'll look at Toronto, Minnesota. Actually, we'll keep them off. We'll look at LA Thieves. I think it's obviously pretty condensed, as we talked about earlier. Draza and Octane. That's going to be it for me. I'm probably not going to look to restack this at all. I can't. I mean, I could see Florida get outplayed that heavily in a 3-0. I think FaZe could, or Atlanta, sorry. I think the Thieves could definitely 3-0 here, and they could put up some numbers. Kenny at 7-6, I guess, would probably be the third man in because Envoy is super expensive. However, again, I do think it's going to be Draza and Octane and kind of move on from there. Last one up is obviously Atlanta, Seattle. Again, we kind of talked about it. You could argue playing all four of these players, Pred, Simp, Celium, and Sib. You could definitely stack up here a good bit. I probably wouldn't go to 3 stacking. If I was, I would stack for both teams, to be honest. Like, again, if you want to do Celium, Pred, and then Simp, or Celium, Pred, and Sib, like, you could definitely argue that for sure. Like, I think this series seems pretty good for these star players. I couldn't see myself making a lineup without having Pred or Cilium in them. I think they're just way too cheap at what they do, and they're going to be two of probably the most owned players on the slate. But I think it's kind of necessary just with how the map set looks, with how well they've been playing. Like, if we were to look at the whole league, I'm sure they would probably be tops of it. Yeah, they are. Pred and Cilium right there, 1 and 2. So that is the direction I will be headed, and yeah, I think that'll be it. I guess official pick would be for Seattle for the for the records that I keep in the description. Seattle would be the pick, but I think mixing and matching both sides for DK is definitely the move. So that'll be it from me tonight. I'll see you guys all again tomorrow for the 3-gamer that is on Sunday. We'll look into that, when we get there, but I will see you guys all then. Best luck to you guys tonight, and have a good one.